welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Wednesdays. I'm really excited that my guest this week is one of the leading voices when it comes to one of my favorite hobbies outside of enjoying wrestling. It's collecting the trading cards and collector cards. Really excited to jump into a conversation with the Wrestling Card Price Guide's Paul Anand. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm good, Martin. Thanks for having me.
It's a genuine pleasure. I mean, obviously, well, we were just talking a few minutes ago about your connection to the UK from your childhood, but it's great to speak to you in sunny Canada this morning. I hope all's going well over there.
And it actually is sunny today, which is nice because we've had like a winter that wasn't too cold, a lot of snow, but it's been gray, gray days after, well, you would know in England. But today was actually, I went to the gym this morning and even though it was chilly, it was sunny, which is nice.
Perfect. That's ideal. That's what we need. You need more of those sort of days to help you. You wake up better on those sort of days, I believe.
Absolutely.
So before we sort of jump into the work you're doing now and the work you've done in the last 15 years, I kind of wondered if you could take us back to where it began for you in terms of watching wrestling before you even started collecting cards. What's your sort
Sure.
of what made you fall in
Way,
love with the industry?
way back as a kid. Um, I didn't have a ball throwing hangout with father. We were different. He was East Indian, and there was a cultural divide when we came over to Canada. But the one thing I remember as a kid was there was in Toronto a wrestler by the name of Tiger Jeet Singh, and he was the most popular celebrity amongst the Indian community. So my dad, and not even so much my dad, but his buddies would go to the Maple Leaf Gardens, which is the old arena in town here, just with a lot of other Indians, displaced Indians in Toronto to see and cheer on Tiger Jeet. And he would go and I would want to come, but they wouldn't let me. And I would be kicking and screaming. I want to go with my dad and his buddies, just to hang out with my dad and his buddies, to whatever it was they were doing on Sunday nights downtown. So they kicking and screaming, one of my dad's buddies said, yeah, bring the kid. He's a kid, and that was it. And that very card that I went to, the very first one, that was the original Sheik. Now, I don't know, Martin, if you go way back, if you know who the original Sheik was, but I contend to this day he was probably the greatest heel that's ever existed in wrestling. So we were spoiled up here in Toronto, and it just took with me. I just loved it. And then a short time thereafter, I have a very, very specific memory of seeing Ric Flair and Harley Race on the curfew match, going for like 45 minutes, and they just beat the crap out of each other. And I loved it. And you go through life and things change, but wrestling was always a constant for me. I've always sort of watched it, I've always stuck with it. And, there's times where you're closer to it. And then, of course, once the collecting of cards started, and it grew and grew and grew and grew, that sort of anchored me to the product even more. So the cards connect me to the wrestling, and of course, the wrestling connects me to the cards.
That's incredible. It's magic, isn't it? And it's a weird thing of, I think obviously there's a lot of in the UK, especially at the moment, there's a lot of obsession with the sort of 80s, 90s culture because a lot of people that are currently interacting with streaming or whatever are a similar age group to myself and lived through those periods of time. And it's that harking back to what life was like. And I think with wrestling, no matter how good something is now, it always takes you back to that early memories, doesn't it? And you always remember that, like you were mentioning the the guys you saw
Well,
in
it's
Canada.
funny if you were to ask me, to name the main events of each WrestleMania, I can probably go from 1 to 15 and tell you each one what the main one, but I can't tell you who headlined 2, 3 years ago. You know what I mean? That's how memory works. You're tied to the Hogan run,
Mhm.
because that was such a time. Tied to the Attitude Era of Austin and Rock because that was such a time. You know what I mean? And these are the things. Like I remember Brock beating Undertaker at WrestleMania and going, what? And all
Yeah.
the things. And it's just been such an enjoyable ride. We have our ups and downs. We had a real down last week in the wrestling business. Um,
Yeah.
it's something that if you're into it and you like it, you love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's my personality. When I get into something, when I get into music or I get into wrestling or anything else, I'm full of, all in. So.
And so when did that move into sort of trading cards, collector cards for you?
Cards, when I was a kid in Toronto, hockey is everything. And
Mhm.
my dad, when he'd come home from work, he'd stop at the corner store to buy us cigarettes, and it was packs there. And one day I went with him and I said, I want a pack of hockey cards. And they were a dime or 15 cents or whatever they were. So that became an easy thing for my dad to come home with 10 packs. He used to come up with loads of packs for me of hockey.
Amazing.
And that's the first memory. Then I do have memories of non-sport stuff in grade school, the Star Wars, because that was when Star Wars came out and Charlie's Angels and all those things. I
Mm,
was in grade 7, grade 8, right at that sort of young guy getting into the hobby. And then, of course, later in the 80s, the Topps cards for the Hogans came out in the mid 80s. And that's interesting, Martin, because I actually recall getting those out of packs, like buying packs, opening those at the time and putting the set together that way. And I don't think I've ever done that since. And all the not thousands, several hundred sets that I've collected since then. And when I started my first business after university, I still had a lot of the hockey cards from when I
mm,
was a kid, including rookie Gretzky's that now on a top grade are worth $1 million. And I must have a I must have had a gym bag full of about a half a dozen to 9 or 10 of them, like seriously. And I sold them all to this one guy. I didn't know what they were worth. The hobby was just getting out of that junk wax era, and he took it all, and he gave me enough money to start my business, which I did well with. So that
mm,
worked out. But the one thing I kept was some wrestling cards. There was some wrestling in the thing, and it was a set there, and I'm like, oh shit, I remember collecting these. I said, you know what? I'm going to keep these wrestling cards because WrestleMania just happened. It looked like it was going to start on another high. So I kept them. I should have kept the Gretzky's, obviously, but I kept the wrestling cards. So one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life. But that was the launch point for me to connect the next set and the next set after that. And that's how it started. And I went pretty much through to the end of the Fleer era in 2003, having bought everything, like every set that had ever come out, every insert set that had ever come out,
wow,
a good portion of all the Fleer uh, um, inserts and autographs. In fact, when Fleer went out of business, I had the opportunity to buy pennies on the dollar a lot of the inventory, wrestling inventory that was still kicking around. That was facilitated through the guy that I wrote the wrestling card price guide with, the original book.
mm,
And we got that done through Fleer, and that filled in a lot of big holes in my collection. So at that point, I had one of the more substantial, diverse collections of wrestling cards out there, and it just kept going. Now, of course, when parallels and that kind of stuff started, being a completist went out the window. You couldn't buy everything anymore. And then in around 2016, being up here in Canada became very prohibitive with the global shipping program that eBay operates to buy insert cards one at a time. Because what would end up happening, Martin, is you'd buy a card for say $10 and then you'd spend $10 to ship it.
yeah,
And the economics just didn't work out. Now I've solved that problem recently with a buddy of mine down in the States where everything ships through him and up to me now. And he's fantastic, for helping me with that. But once that came in, it made it very difficult. So at that point, I stopped buying a lot of the relics, a lot of the memorabilia, a lot of the autographs, and I just focused only on the sets, which in and of itself is a big enough endeavor. Um, and we kept that going right through to Panini. I just completed the Immaculate base set, which I believe is the only one in the world that's been put together.
wow,
So it's been a labor of love. And throughout that time, we created the Wrestling Card Price Guide, and I worked very closely with Tony Vella at WrestlingTradingCards.com on the sort of archiving end of figuring out what's out there to bring it to the hobby so that people would know, okay, what sets have what. And between myself, Tony, and our buddy Chuck Davy, the Chuckster we call him, we've archived and unearthed a good chunk of everything that you're going to find out there online, and a lot of that comes from us at some point in the past. So we're very proud of it, of the work that we've done, and we're sticklers for being right. We take it very seriously, even though this is just for fun and it's just a hobby, and we do these shows and we promote ourselves at the national and we do other things to bring attention to the hobby. We take the archiving end of it and getting the information part of it very seriously because it's important to us as collectors to make sure the information is correct. So we want to make sure that you guys get everything correct as well.
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's the impressive thing about everything you've done. I mean, it's you've got a passion for collecting anyway, so therefore you're trying to help others, and it's that community option that I think really works well with wrestling in general. It feels like a bit of a
Oh,
community anyway. Whenever you're part of any
well,
company
there's
or
always been a
group,
community, but until very recently, till after COVID, when we were all sort of stuck inside and we started doing videos, we started reaching out
mm,
and doing more projects wrestling related. Um, there wasn't any organization around the hobby. There wasn't, we Tony and I were looking to galvanize what we'd done, to leverage what we'd done through our websites and our vast knowledge of wrestling cards. And we knew a lot of guys, but the guys didn't know each other. So the idea was, how do we create something where Martin meets Chuck, meets Paul, meets Tony, meets Adam, so that we can all work together for the betterment of the hobby? And that's sort of been our mission over these last few years. And, first and foremost is enjoying ourselves, having fun, and sometimes, like anything, when you're dealing with people, shit happens. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to make the experience enjoyable for everybody in this hobby because we're a smaller hobby. We're not baseball, we're not hockey, we're not football. Um, but we've seen it grow. And it's been a real community effort, not just myself and Tony and Chuck and a few other main guys that provide content and do things, but a lot of guys. Like, for example, there's a group of 12 of us called the Brotherhood that deal just with indie cards. And
Mhm.
these guys, Martin, are the guys. There is
Wow.
nobody else that knows outside of these 12 guys. And again, it's because we're invested in the product. These are guys that uncovered the limitless stuff and are on the cutting edge of what's new. And we archivists that publish this information, we rely on these guys to let us know, hey, there's this card here, there's this card in Nottingham, there's this card in Australia, there's this card wherever,
Mhm.
um, to bring the knowledge forward to the community.
Are you all the guys that I've seen on Twitter, there's or X, what it's called now, the collection of cards of you guys, is that the 12?
Yes. Well, there's 100 in that set.
Oh
We
wow.
did that, yeah, we did that set last year, and I conceived the idea again as a community building exercise to try and bring people together because, like, for example, we meet today and we become friends. Now
Mhm.
there's a possibility of us doing business, or we're tied to each other,
Yeah.
and that's what it was. Similarly, a couple of years ago, we did a panel at the National for the first time on wrestling, and
Oh.
that was the first time really that we sort of went to the outside world and said, hey, here we are.
Mm.
And then we did it again last year. And we also created something called the main event, which was more of like a trade night where guys
Mhm.
could just come and display their stuff. And that went very well. Now we're starting to lay the seeds for Cleveland this year to do something even bigger. So it's very thrilling to me to see that from these small things that Tony and Chuck and myself started, it's grown and mushroomed into this large community, and we get a lot of love out there and we get a lot of respect out there, which we really appreciate. You know what I mean? And our thing is that we're here for the community. It's all labor of love. um, but doing shows like this I really appreciate, because what this does is that it lets me get the message out to all the collectors that, hey, we're a good bunch of guys and there's a lot of fun to be had in the wrestling card world.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing. I suppose, do you get to a point where I always find now whenever I meet someone, they'll talk to me about a time when, oh, I was a wrestling fan back in the day, or I like wrestling, or they know a wrestling fan, and they don't necessarily realize they were, or they don't talk about it publicly. Do you get people that you've met through that have collected other cards that you meet at these events that will turn around and go, oh, actually, I used to collect wrestling cards, or I've still got my wrestling cards?
You get some closet wrestling guys. You get some guys that are very obvious about it. Like at the National last couple of years, there's been some tables all wrestling. And like
Wow.
15 years ago, when I first did the printed price guide and went down to the National, and I was trying to huck it there and trying to talk to as many people as I could about wrestling cards, everyone thought I was off my nut. They thought I was crazy. First of all, a lot of people didn't even know about wrestling cards. Second of all, wrestling, is that a thing? And then for the longest time, we sort of sat in between the sports world and non-sports world where people just didn't know how to deal with us. So our thing is that, knowledge, let people know what's out there. Now, of course, with the Panini releases over the last couple of years, we went from here to here insofar as knowledge within the hobby. But yeah, to your question, when I'm talking to people, a lot of people say, yeah, I used to watch wrestling, maybe not collected necessarily. Um, but wrestling is the kind of thing, and it's on a particular high point now. It goes in waves, like obviously the Attitude Era was the Attitude Era was its height, and then the Cena era went down a little bit. And there's different generations, but now it's very, very popular again. Um, so and so is card collecting again after COVID. I mean, it went high, way high up, and then it came down, but landed at a place much higher than what we started at.
Yeah.
And we're at the point now where we're almost at critical mass, where we're an actual force within the trading card hobby, and people that run the National and bigger dealers are starting to look at we wrestling guys a lot more seriously.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's good to know. Obviously, before we started recording, I mentioned that I was going to ask you about the differences between the markets, and you mentioned how popular the work you do is in the UK. How does it differ when between sort of at the moment in terms of popularity with USA and Canada against the international market for you?
Well, we I mentioned to you that through the wrestling card price guide, we can look and see who's coming to our site, and we've been blessed to have to build it over these years and have a pretty sizable audience of a couple of hundred unique people plus a day on the site, so we can monitor where they're coming from. And obviously United States first, but as I mentioned to you, sometimes it's the UK that's second, not Canada, and in fact India. Now India could be just because the wrestling card price guide is one of the few places where you can find the Indian trump cards en masse. You know, they're going to find more there than anywhere else. And that's because I've spent time sort of going through them and trying to figure out what's what, because they're very regional, you know, and sometimes we don't have all the answers, you know, and we try and figure it out as best we can, because now PSA, the guys that do the grading, they come to us. They look to us for information. Like they'll go to wrestlingtradingcards.com, they'll go to the wrestling card price guide, and they'll use what we've printed as basis for verifying the existence of something or the validity or something or the technical information on something. So again, as I mentioned earlier, that's why we take what we do seriously, because we know that the grading companies are looking at it. We know that, you know, and if guys are going to spend big money on the card, you know, we don't want them to be taken advantage. We want to make sure that they know what they're doing and how they're doing it. So, yeah, the market is global now for sure. You know, I get people in Indonesia to the site, certainly all over Europe. You know, the 95 Paninis, which is one of the rarer card sets, I found in New Zealand, and we know that they were released in Italy, and we know that some of them have surfaced in South Africa, but very few over here on this side of the pond. So, you know, it speaks to um, the regional differences. Like where you are, for example, Slam Attacks is very big, and for
Yeah,
the longest time, you know, the gaming cards were more desirable in the UK than the actual release, you know, the standard releases like a Topps or a Panini.
all right.
That's probably changed now. Also, you guys don't have access to all the product that we do, and sometimes there's a bit of a time delay. But we know, for example, and you would know these guys, Kevin Williams, the Tweet guys, Jamie Stalker. These are guys from your part of the world that have done what we've done over here for the UK. And let me just say thanks to you again for the work that you're doing. And I know you're going to start doing more content. And it's wonderful. We, in the early days, myself, Tony, Zan, Card Foundation guys, we were very encouraging of people putting out new content, because there can't be too much of it. You know what I mean? Because you're going to reach guys that we're not, just by virtue of where you are and who you are and the work that you've done. So for us, it's very much a grow this thing and get it to the point where all of a sudden we're not laughed at when we go into a room saying that you collect wrestling cards.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's very. We're in a great time at the moment where we're lucky enough that in-person activities and things are back on, and like you say, you can go to things like the National. But there's so much online communities that you can build, and with all the work you do with your podcast, with your guide, with all the
Sure.
stuff on the website, etc. I think it's important for people to release content when they're a specialist or have got knowledge on something, because it helps people that have a connection to it to understand. Oh, I can go to that person, or I can listen to
And
that person
we
and
have
feel part
actual
of it.
longitudinal knowledge. So in other words, we were there
Mm,
20 years ago. This isn't something that a small group of us, there are guys in the hobby now that have ascended to positions of power that didn't collect a wrestling card 4 years ago.
yeah.
You know what I mean? But we speak from experience. You know, I own the cards, one. Like I have upstairs in my office a wall that's massive of 35,000 plus cards.
Incredible.
Virtually every set that's ever been made. But again, it's been done over time, Martin. So
Mm,
it might seem like a big thing now, but if you look at it over the course of 20 years, like I have 107 of the WCW wrestling autographs, you know, those ones. Yeah, I have sets that people don't even know about, you know. And that's our thing, is that because we were there and we were living it, we were able to provide the information in a correct manner. And
uh,
again, shout out to Chuck and Tony, because I don't want anybody to think that it's just Paul. It's very much a combined effort of myself, Chuck, and Tony to get this information out there and get it right.
yeah, I mean yeah. Shout out to all of them. We appreciate all the work that you guys do, and I think it
Because
shows.
there's a lot. There's two websites. We organize national. We put out the card sets. Tony and I were doing a monthly show where we're counting down the top cards and looking at market index. Now we've got something called the Collector Series, which is sort of played off the collector's card series that we created, where we're featuring guys that were in that set and letting them talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. You know, and again, just new faces, new names, growing the hobby.
Yeah, I watched the recent one with the Becky Lynch collection.
Yeah, wasn't that a good one? Because
Yeah,
that was a
really good.
great I really enjoyed that one, because it's a practical example of how two guys that you would think would be at odds trying to collect the same rare pieces, and yet somehow they've forged a relationship whereby they're more effective together.
Yeah, I like that. It shows that be supportive, and you'll get, and you can, obviously
Sure.
there'll be a level of oh, I really want to get hold of that one or whatever. But it's better to be supportive and support, you know, because at the end of the day, people have got your back. If you help them out, they'll help you out
Right.
further down the line. So totally
Yeah.
agree with that. I
Again,
was
it goes
going to
back to what I said at the outset. We do this for fun
ask,
and we do the same things. So we're all brothers. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, how rare is it that you get off on collecting a little piece of cardboard with a wrestler on it? Well, so do I. We got, that makes it, we could sit in a room,
it's,
grab it. Yeah, we can sit in a room together, grab a beer and talk for hours on end just
yeah,
off of that.
it's incredible, isn't it? And you can
It
get
is.
so you can learn and have passion about it. And I love that. That's what's beautiful about it. Um,
That's what community is, like-minded guys, right? That's why it's annoying to us when we have, guys high up in the hobby, very knowledgeable guys that contribute significantly that don't get along, you know.
yeah.
It's a shame because these are, we call them the OGs, guys that have been around for a while that know what they're talking about, that have made very, very significant contributions to the hobby. Um, and we like things to be positive, you know what I mean? Because it reflects poorly on us to the outside world when they see, and that happens
Mhm.
still, unfortunately. But for us, it's like make sure that you enjoy it first, And people say, "Oh, that's a cliche, collect what you like." But why else would you be doing this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was going to ask you about how AEW have gone about with their trading cards. They over the last few years they've been releasing packs of cards that were very difficult to get into the UK. They were out in America to
Are they?
start with, um, but it felt a bit more like they were trying to be similar to the NFL cards or other sports cards rather than like you
Upper
mentioned
Deck
the wrestling
when they
cards.
picked up the license, we were excited at that time, but it just
Mhm.
so happens historically that the Panini era started at the same time that Topps lost the license and so that took some of the shine off of Upper Deck. And unfortunately, last year Upper Deck dropped the ball insofar as its release timetable, and several months went by without any product. Now, again, I can't speak to the UK and its availability there, but I know that set a lot of guys back on the AEW product. And just like anything, some fans are fans of AEW wrestling, some fans are fans of WWF or WWE, sorry,
Mhm.
and some collect both, some collect just the one. That's the great thing about wrestling and collecting. You watch what you like, you collect what you like. Some guys are only into the indie stuff, only want
Yeah.
to watch Impact, only want to watch GCW, that kind of thing. Um, I love it all. I'm at the church around the corner for every indie show that there is. I'm not at every WWE show that comes to town anymore because it's just too bloody expensive. But
Yeah.
like it's a night out, and it's always going to be fun for me.
Yeah, that's the cool thing. I think is that you've never lost that interest in the
No,
actual product still. It's not like you're just collecting the cards from the era that you grew up enjoying it. You're still into it now, so everything matters, and that's why you've got that insight in what's going
right,
on now. It's not just that you're
exactly.
looking at the all the cards that came out in the early '90s. You've got knowledge of now because you're keeping an eye on that market, and I think that's
Right.
why
And we
you
know that
focus.
most of our market is PC collectors, about
Mm,
75% are guys that collect just one guy or one or two.
yeah,
But when you're a master set collector, you end up being a PC collector of everybody. Like I can put together a decent personal collection of any wrestler you can think of because I've
mm,
got every set that's come along. And if they were in it, I have it. I might not have the high-end parallel, but I've got a card, so um, that's one of the things that keeps me tied to it is that the knowledge of wrestling comes from doing it day by day,
mhm.
and watching it week after week. And then all of a sudden one day you find yourself old and gray and you know a bit about it.
It's good. How do you think it's obviously you mentioned earlier about the level of money that the Gretzky and the rookie cards. It seems to be rookie cards for NFL and baseball or hockey, etc. That goes incredibly big. Where do you think wrestling falls at this moment in time compared to other sports, and do you think it could grow to that level?
Not to that level. Not to that level because again, it's hockey is massive. Football is massive, like it's more than 10x the time. Um, in our world, we have the 1982 Wrestling All-Stars, which are kind of considered to be the premier set, old school vintage set. And high grades of these cards tend to go into the five figures, So they're the ones, of course, last year we had a rock black prism, the first one go for $126,000. And we knew before that card even came out that it was expected to be one of the highest valued wrestling cards to ever be made. But, you know, Prism did a lot to bump prices, a lot of grading, obviously, if you're into it. I'm not personally,
Mhm.
but a lot of people are, and I recognize that if you want to get maximum dollars for your card, you have to grade, and the PSA registry fosters a lot of competition that again drives up prices. So there is that element, Martin, of competition that helps drive the prices of wrestling, and just the fact that wrestling is on a high now. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of good performers now. So you have the opportunity not only to go back and buy the Rocks, the Austins, the Hogans, the Savages, and the Stings, but you can buy today the Roman Reigns, the Rhea Ripleys, the LA Knights, the new crop of people that are going to push the hobby forward as well.
I've got to ask, if you're on the way out and you had an emergency and you could only pick, I don't know, a collection or one particular card, not necessarily for value, but from your collection, and you had a chance to, say, grab one card or grab a collection of cards,
Well,
what would you choose and why?
2 weeks ago, I would have said the Vince McMahon Transcendent Auto. You know, today I might not say that, but I'm
Hmm.
grabbing my binder of 95 Paninis because it's the only complete set in the world that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And the second thing I might grab is the Impeccables that came out last year because it's the only complete set of Impeccables that I'm aware of. The top 2016 is very, very rare, the online set, and very few people have that set. Micro brawlers, which are these little figures that are made by Pro Wrestling Tees, have these cutouts on the back. I have over 125 of them. It by far is the largest collection of micro brawlers out there. So I'd be going for something that I know that I couldn't readily replace.
Hmm.
A lot of the other stuff I have, so does everybody else. Like I might have, the Royal Rumble Fleer set, which is considered the top Fleer era set because of the four rookies in it. But you go to Tony's store and he might have 10 of them on his shelf. They're not that rare. So I would be inclined to. Now I have a lot of I have a lot of parallel autographs and stuff that have value. Obviously, all 107 WCW autographs, I'd probably make a run for those, just because they're all there. But yeah, my most valuable card may still be that Vince.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But
I don't
even
think,
more
by the
so,
way, that the value is going to suffer. There's a bit of a stigma now, but people are saying, look at his cards hitting. I read this morning, his cards are hitting the market en masse. Well, they're not getting cheaper; they're getting more expensive. Just so everyone knows.
yeah. I mean, they're not gonna. He's certainly not going to be signing
No, they're
anymore
rare.
for anytime
No, they're
soon, is
rare.
he? So,
It's like David Peck has a Donald Trump autograph,
mm,
right? Like him or hate him, Donald Trump is Donald Trump. That card's worth money, big time,
yeah.
right? That's that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So before we go, I want to obviously give you a chance to talk about the wrestling card price guide and how people can get involved,
Sure.
and where they can, for example,
Right.
they can buy the book. They can actually buy the physical copy
The
of the
book,
card.
the book's the book's right out of date now because it only went to 2010 at the time, and then we never
Okay.
updated it in print since then. And what my wife designs websites, so at the time she created a site to sell the book. And
Mm.
then once the books were predominantly sold out, then we started updating online the new stuff. So it was like, here's the book, and then everything after you can see online. But then we went back and started filling in everything from the book online. And I should mention that that book was done with a guy that's not with us anymore. His name was Grim, and he was one of the first characters in North America to be into wrestling cards in a big way. He had a store, Wrestling Card Universe. I can't remember what it was called, but he was a gothy kind of character, and he had relationships with Fleer and with Tops, and he sold more cards than anybody else, um, by a wide margin. And he was the guy that actually helped me put that book together. I did the book, but he provided the prices. And then since then, I've kept the wrestling card price guide going, more so just so that we'd have a record of everything, of every set. And there was a spell there where Tony took a hiatus for about 5 years, and me and Chuck we had to keep everything going on our own. And I'm glad that we did because we don't want there to be any holes. Like I said to you earlier, we want the record to be complete and accurate. And I think we've done a decent job of doing that.
Yeah, you really have. I'll put all the links obviously underneath
Sure.
on the description. I've got a final question for you about Roman Reigns. If he ends up beating Bruno Sammartino's reign as WWE champion, do you think those rookie cards or his first initial cards are going to go higher and higher in value, or do you think
Yes.
maybe this is?
Yeah, so the Superfractor, the 2014 Chrome Superfractor, has gone up tremendously. I can't say exactly how much, if it's
Hmm.
5x, 10x, 15x, but that was a card that was within the realm of affordability 5 years ago. You know, um, Now it's not. Now it's a $15,000 card, and you're going to find that with the number to tens, the number to 50s. Yeah, Roman's here to stay.
Yeah, that's incredible,
I,
isn't it?
I I'm bullish about all three of those guys in the Shield. I think Roman, Moxley, and Seth Rollins are going to have value. Rhea Ripley is going to have value. Vince, despite what's going on presently, his cards are going to continue to go up. Obviously, the main names in the hobby, like The Rock and Austin and Hogan, and perhaps the biggest name in the hobby remains to this day to be Andre the Giant. And Andre the Giant's signature is worth more than anyone else's signature
Oh,
because there's so few of them. You know,
Mm.
he never actually signed a card. You know, there's been some cut signatures made and this kind of thing, but Andre has been a very, very popular guy in the hobby. And again, this is stuff we know because there's a guy named Main Event Collectibles that focuses on Andre stuff, and he shares information with me. So we get to meet the guys. Like in my card set, I met the top Daniel Bryan when I made the collector's card series. I met the top Daniel Bryan collector. I met the top Seth collector. And you know these guys. So now you have resources. So I can go to anybody. If I need to talk wrestling cards in Nottingham, I know about This Is Wrestling Film and Martin, you know, and that's what this is all about. It's just all of us connecting to make the greater whole.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. I look forward to
My
stay,
pleasure.
obviously
Thank you for
continuing
having
the
me on.
conversations. And yeah, as I said, it's a genuine pleasure to get a chance to chat to you for the first time properly. And thank you for everything that you do.
And thanks to you, you know, like we very much encourage this, new content, new videos, you know, and as you're doing your Wednesday thing, we'll help spread the word about it, and we'll work together. We'll tag team, so to speak. And that's what it's been about in this hobby is trying to get like-minded guys to just move the thing forward and have a good time.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to speaking
My
soon.
pleasure. Thank you.